Thank you for spending time with Echoes of Family. At the body, the message wasn't spoken, it was served. Let's start there.
That's all you deserve. Her voice sliced through the music, sharper than the silver cutlery. Laughter swelled around the ballroom. But at my table, only a cold piece of bread. I smiled, small and tired. The USB in my pocket felt heavier than truth itself. My name's Abigail Foster. I'm 35, a documentary filmmaker. I spend my life chasing other people's truths, because mine has always been ignored. 60 guests, glasses clinking, my father glowing in the spotlight, the man who never saw the shadows in his own house. I'd come ready to destroy them, to burn the illusion they'd built. But when I saw him laugh, I couldn't move. The truth sat in my hand. And for the first time, I wondered if exposing them would also break him. Sometimes revenge looks a lot like mercy, until you choose which one to keep. Would you burn your family to be seen, or walk away? The truth was ready to explode. I wasn't. When people say family, they picture warmth. Mine always felt like frost. After my mother died, my father remarried fast, a woman who smiled like glass. She brought her daughter too, and from that moment on, I was an extra in my story. She dressed her child in silk, took her to ballet, called her my pride. To me, she offered silence, and a list of things I'd never be. At dinners, I was the shadow refilling water, the joke nobody heard. When I spoke, she'd tilt her head and say, "Why do you make things awkward?" My father never defended me. His eyes stayed on balance sheets, not bruised hearts. I learned early. If you can't belong, observe. At 16, I bought a secondhand camera, with money from tutoring kids, who had real families. I filmed everything. Stray dogs, dim porches, faces that didn't fit the frame. She called it a hobby. It became survival. Because behind the lens, no one could interrupt me. No one could tell me. I was too small to matter. When I left at 18, I didn't cry. I packed the camera, and the silence I'd mastered. My sister got pearls. I got purpose. Every documentary I made was a way of saying, I exist. Years later, the email arrived. My father's 60th birthday. Cold RSVP link. No greeting. No, we miss you. I stared at the screen, remembering winter halls. The closed study door. My name never called. I almost deleted it. Then I didn't. Because the work had taught me what childhood hadn't. You don't wait to be seen. You bring the light. So I said yes, not for their table, but for my own voice. If they wanted a silent daughter, they'd invited the wrong woman. I charged my batteries. I labeled drives. I steadied my hands. The frost had taught me discipline. The lens had taught me courage. Both would meet in Raleigh. Invisible kids grow cameras. We learned to aim back. The week before the party, I wasn't sleeping much. The city hummed outside my apartment, but inside, everything was too quiet. Emails, footage, deadlines. I buried myself in work, pretending not to think about that RSVP I'd said yes to. Then Ellen showed up, storming in with her sketch pad, and a face that meant trouble. "You won't believe what I heard," she said, dropping onto my couch. She'd been sketching at a cafe downtown. When she overheard my sister on the phone, her voice low, sharp, the kind she used when she thought no one was listening. "It's all set, Kyle. Dad won't suspect a thing." Those words sliced through me. Ellen didn't even need to explain. I knew that tone. Scheming, confident, cruel. My father's company was his life, the one thing he built from nothing. And they, his wife and golden child, were planning to steal it right from under him. We stayed up all night digging. Ellen remembered a cloud folder she'd once used for a project with my sister. She never changed her password. Inside, emails, scanned contracts, messages with a man named Kyle, and a draft agreement ready for signature. My father's shares, set to be transferred to her name. I stared at the screen, my chest tight. It wasn't about money. It was betrayal, the kind that rewrites every childhood memory and makes you question if love ever lived there at all. Ellen leaned closer. "You have enough to end them," she said quietly. "Maybe," I whispered. "But how do you expose rot? Without burning the whole house down?" I saved everything to a small USB drive. It felt heavier than it should, like holding proof of every silent dinner, every insult swallowed. The next morning, I walked through downtown Raleigh with my camera bag, filming reflections in shop windows, faces passing by, each one reminding me that truth has its own timing. At sunrise, I stood by my window, watching light spill across the floorboards. The air smelled like rain and coffee. Sharp, grounding. My camera blinked red, recording nothing but silence. And somehow that silence felt louder than any confession I'd ever filmed. I zipped my bag, camera gear first, then the USB, then a black dress that felt like armor. The skyline outside blurred again, but this time it didn't look like grief. It looked like resolve. When morning came, I didn't hesitate. Ticket in hand, heart steady, I whispered to the empty room. This time, I'm not filming someone else's story. The silence wasn't weakness, it was fuel. The party shimmered like a lie polished to perfection. Crystal chandeliers, polite laughter, the hum of money and manners. I smiled, silent, my heart beating in time with the jazz band. Dad was across the room shaking hands, his gray suit pressed, his confidence unshaken. Karen hovered near him, pouring charm like syrup. Shannon trailed behind, a golden echo that never earned her shine. I stayed in the shadows, my old habit. But this time I wasn't hiding. I was watching. When the speeches began, I slipped out the side door, down the hall lined with portraits of men who built legacies. I stopped at his office. The door was half open. The desk, his altar, gleamed under the lamplight. I set the USB beside his nameplate and waited. He found me there minutes later. "Abby?" he said softly, like he wasn't sure I'd really shown up. "Did Karen send you?" "No," I said. "I came because you deserve to know the truth." He frowned. "About what?" "About what they've been planning." I slid the drive toward him. "She's trying to transfer your shares to Shannon. It's all here. Emails, contracts, everything." He stared at it, then at me, a dozen emotions flickering behind his eyes. "You're mistaken," he said at first. "She wouldn't." "She would," I said quietly. "She already has." Silence stretched between us. He sank into his chair, opened the laptop, and pressed play. The room filled with voices. Shannon's laugh, Karen's calm commands, Kyle's careless bragging. Every word cracked the image he'd built of them. When it ended, he didn't look at me. He just whispered, "Dear God." The jazz from the hall drifted through the walls, soft, distant, unreal. Finally, he said, "You could have humiliated us tonight. Why didn't you?" "Because I wasn't trying to destroy you," I said. "I just wanted you to see me." His hands trembled slightly. Then, to my surprise, he reached across the desk, placing his palm over mine. "I see you now," he said. Tears burned. Not from pain, from release. Years of silence collapsing in a single breath. He stood hesitating. And for the first time since I was 5, he pulled me into a quiet, awkward hug. It wasn't perfect. It was real. When he stepped back, his eyes were tired, but softer. Outside, the music swelled again, and laughter rippled down the hall, like nothing had happened. But something had. Something irreversible. He turned back once more, his voice low but steady. "You did the right thing," he said. "Thank you." I nodded, unable to speak. For the first time, the word family didn't sound like a wound. Truth didn't need an audience, just courage. The next morning, the sunlight felt sharper, as if the city had noticed what changed. I met Dad at his office again. But this time, he wasn't wearing a suit. No tie. No mask. Just quiet resolve. He didn't say much on the drive home. Only once at a red light, he whispered, "I used to think love meant protecting people from pain." Then he looked straight ahead. Turns out it just meant avoiding the truth. When we reached the house, Karen was waiting on the porch, coffee cup in hand. Her smile rehearsed, perfect. Shannon stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes wary. "Gregory," Karen said sweetly, "you're early." Dad didn't answer. He walked past her, the front door swinging open, like it had been waiting for this moment. Inside, the house smelled like perfume and power. Everything in its place, everything fake. He went straight to his study. Karen followed, heels clicking on the hardwood like a clock ticking down. I stayed near the doorway, close enough to hear, far enough to stay invisible, the role I knew best. He set the USB on the desk. "I watched it," he said quietly. Karen froze. "Watched what?" "The plan. The calls. The contracts." Color drained from her face. She started to speak, but he raised a hand. "Don't." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight, the kind that came from love finally cracking. Shannon stepped forward. "Dad, we didn't mean—" "You meant every word," he said, his tone flat. "You treated my trust like currency." Karen tried again. "Gregory, she's manipulating you. She's my daughter." He cut in, his voice steady, and she just saved what's left of this family. The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Karen's mask faltered, her lips trembling before the tears came. Not grief, but exposure. Dad opened a drawer and slid 2 envelopes across the desk. Divorce papers. And a withdrawal notice. You'll both need to find another place. Shannon's voice cracked. You're choosing her over us? No, he said softly. I'm choosing honesty. Karen's eyes darted to me then, sharp, pleading, the same eyes that used to shrink me. But I didn't flinch. Not this time. Dad walked past them, pausing only once at the doorway. Abby, let's go. And just like that, the empire they'd built on manipulation crumbled without a sound. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the scent of pine and dust. We drove in silence. The road stretched endless ahead, washed in amber light. After a long while, Dad spoke quietly, almost to himself. Peace feels strange, he said. Like something we forgot we could have. I looked out the window, the sun low and forgiving. And for once, I didn't need to say anything at all. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just walks away. 3 months later, the house was gone. Sold quietly. Emptied of everything but echoes. Dad and I moved on separately. But somehow we were closer than ever. He rented a small place near the lake, where the mornings smelled of pine and the air felt clean. Sometimes I'd visit, and we'd sit on the porch without saying much, just watching the water ripple against the dock. The silence between us used to feel heavy. Now it felt like peace. He'd brew coffee in the same chipped mug every morning. When I teased him about it, he'd smile. The kind of smile I'd never seen growing up. Gentle, unguarded. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, he turned to me and said, I watched your film again. I looked up, startled. He nodded slowly. It hurt, he admitted. But I'm proud you had the courage to tell the truth. I wish I had that kind of strength years ago. His words settled in my chest like warmth spreading through winter air. In that moment, I realized something simple. For years, I'd been chasing a version of love that demanded silence. Now I'd learned that real love listens, even when the truth hurts. I kept making documentaries, not about others this time, but about voices like mine, about daughters who dared to speak up, about quiet revolutions born from pain. The first one premiered at a small theater downtown. When the credits rolled, people stood to clap, not for the production, but for the message. And somewhere in the crowd, I saw Dad wiping his eyes. After the screening, he hugged me. No grand speeches, just a quiet embrace that said everything words couldn't. As months passed, I started rebuilding more than my career. I rebuilt my sense of self. The girl who once filmed shadows to feel seen was now standing in the light. Raleigh felt different now. Not smaller, not colder, just honest. Sometimes I'd drive past the old estate, where the walls once held whispers and secrets. It stood empty, ivy curling over the gates. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger, only release. I stopped asking why they'd hurt me. Some people mistake control for love, and some of us spend half our lives unlearning it. But healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about walking out of it, barefoot but free. As I packed my camera for my next trip, I whispered a quiet promise to myself. Never trade your voice for belonging again. Because the truth? It's the only inheritance worth keeping. If you've ever had to break free from your own family's shadow, share your story below. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone.